Welcome to Psych's The Bottom Line Pharmacy Podcast, your regular dose of pharmacy CPA advice to fuel your bottom line, featuring pharmacists, key vendors, and other innovators.
Your checks, yes, you can call me.
So, welcome everybody to another episode of the Bottom Line Pharmacy Podcast. Scotty Sykes here with my co-host, star of the show, Bonnie Bond, and today we have Representative Buddy Carter with Georgia. Honored to have you, Mr. Carter, and welcome you onto the show. Very interesting guest here today. It's not every day we're getting a congressman to talk with our pharmacy audience here. So I guess I'm going to start off with, there's been in Congress, I'm seeing reform PBM signs outside of the Capitol there, which I've never seen. So I got to say that has to be a good trend, right? That's got to be something good if there's signs out front, reform PBM. So where the hell is all this in Congress, and when the hell are y'all going to fix this?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm honored to be on, and thank you for noticing that we are making progress, because we are making progress. Look, when I became a member of Congress 10 years ago, I was the first member who was a pharmacist since the early 1970s, I believe, and really, no one even knew what PBM stood for. They didn't know what the acronym meant. And thanks to the good work of the grassroots, we've been able to educate members of Congress as to what PBMs are, what they do, and how they're ripping off the public and causing higher drug prices and not bringing value to healthcare. And that's been good to see. You're right. I get frustrated too. I want to see it. It's so obvious to me and so blatant. I want to see it taken care of immediately. But there are times when we do get a little discouraged. But I want to assure everyone we are making progress. You're right. There are signs out there. Do away with PBMs. In fact, I will share with you that just this week we had a hearing in the Budget Committee, of all places, about consolidation in healthcare. And one of the things that was brought out, not just by me, but by many members and on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, was drug pricing and PBMs and how they're driving up the cost of drugs and not helping in the vertical integration that exists, that we all understand, being inside baseball and understanding pharmacy. Now members of Congress are beginning to understand that. And it's, again, the reason for that, and listen, I'll be glad to take all the credit if you want me to, but the truth is the credit belongs to our members and to the pharmacists out there who have educated members of Congress. Because keep in mind, we're a citizen legislature. I'm a pharmacist. For many years, I was the only pharmacist in Congress. Now we've got another member who is a pharmacist. So I'm just the oldest pharmacist in Congress. But I'm a pharmacist. We've got a thoracic surgeon. We've got urologists. We've got new car salesmen. We've got preachers. We've got farmers. We've got way too many lawyers. But it is truly a citizen legislature. And listen, when we're talking about healthcare, I'm fine. I can navigate healthcare. But once we get outside of healthcare, I need help. And that's why I go to my fellow members who are experts in the field, and I talk to them. I go to the CPA. What are they talking about here? Explain this to me. I go to the new car salesman. I say, what kind of impact is this going to have on your business? Tell me about this. Every day, and I'm not exaggerating, I have another member of Congress, come up to me and say, I didn't know you were a pharmacist. I had a pharmacist call me the other day, and they say, you got a letter that I need to get on to. So I'm going to get my staff to call your staff, and we're going to get on that letter. That's what's making the difference. And we've been able to expose the PBMs. Now, look, they're strong. They've got a lot of money, and they've got some high-paid lobbyists up here. So this is not an easy task. It's not an easy lift. It's a heavy lift. But we're making progress.
Well, definitely making progress. You can see with the bills. I know the House passed back in January, I believe it was, some PBM reforms mixed into some tax changes. Of course, we're CPAs and accountants, so we were obviously paying attention to the tax changes as well that was in there. But I know there's some PBM reform in there that didn't get through the Senate. When we talk to pharmacies every day, Bonnie, we're telling, pharmacists wear a lot of hats. They're owners. They're taking care of patients. They're doing payroll. They're trying to run a business. They're looking at other ways of revenue outside of the PBM. And they're also got to be involved politically. You have to be as a pharmacy owner.
The hardest part right now that I see is they're doing all those things. And now because of the climate and the way everything is at the end of the day, when they shut the doors, they're having to pull reports and figure out, they're winners, they're losers. They're looking at family units to see if they can keep patients that they're losing maybe on this drug, but maybe as a family as a whole, they're actually, making some money. And it's just incredible to me to have that kind of research in depth that they're having to look into this stuff just to keep the business going. It's insane.
You're right, Bonnie, and that's a very astute observation on your part, because that's exactly what they're having to do. And it's of course I'm from the state of Georgia, and we've had an example that our legislative session starts the second Monday in January and runs for 40 business days. It's recently ended. But this session, they were trying to have legislation passed because it was discovered that the Georgia State Health Benefit Plan that's sponsored by the state of Georgia, that they're reimbursing independent retail pharmacies less than what chain pharmacies are getting. I mean, how ludicrous is that? Our own state is doing that.
I saw that, and didn't the governor veto or strike?
A couple of things. First of all, they did pass a study to be done to look at it. Now they did add some finances in there to compensate for some of it. However, there was a bill that the governor did veto that would have called for a complete revamp and complete do-over of the whole system. And that was disappointing, but the governor was concerned about the impact it was going to have on the state budget. And I want to believe that, once this study is completed and the data gets out there, that it'll help them to understand how big the problem is. Now, the concern that we've got is what happens in the interim, because we've got pharmacies that are closing every day. I mean, the number, I think there were over 300 independents that closed last year, almost 4% of all the independent retail pharmacies. And that's a problem. And I say it not only from being a pharmacist and concerned about pharmacies, but also as a healthcare consumer, because at the end of the day, all of us, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or independent, we want the same thing. We want accessible, affordable, quality healthcare. Accessible. Pharmacists are the most accessible healthcare professionals in America. 95% of all Americans live within 5 miles of a pharmacy. Now, with independents closing, particularly in the rural areas, that's going to be impacting the accessibility of healthcare in our country. And that's something we need to be concerned about.
Yeah. That is a major concern. And we see, we see the trouble pharmacies are having. We're handling the back office of pharmacies, and there's a lot of them out there that are struggling. And so it's the real world. But so what, Congressman, what are some acts or some legislation that you sponsor that maybe you want to touch on, and maybe where those are in the process? And
thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you about those, because I want to start off by telling you about a study that the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, is doing. When I became a member 10 years ago, the first thing I did when I got here was go to the FTC, asking them to look at the vertical integration that exists within the drug pricing chain, where you have the insurance company that owns the PBM, that owns the group purchasing organization, that owns the pharmacy, that owns the doctor. Ask them to look at that. Finally, almost 2 years ago, a little under 2 years ago, the FTC undertook a study that they are in the process of completing now to look at the impact that PBMs are having on independent retail pharmacies. That is significant. And what happened is they told us when they started the study, they said, look, this study may take 2 to 5 years to complete, but as we go through this process, when we identify egregious practices, we're going to address them. We're not going to wait until the end and address it. I think it's significant to note that already the FTC has gone back and retracted positive statements that they've said about PBMs in the past. And they've made it clear that that's no longer the case, that PBMs are not benefiting consumers. So I think that's pretty significant.
And that final report should be coming out soon, if I'm not mistaken, within the year or something. Maybe.
The FTC has struggled, and it's just like I hate to say this, but it's just like any other government agency. The wheels move very slow here. Yeah. But they've just recently gotten 2 more. It's a 5-member board with 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. They were without 2 Republicans for a long time, but they've got 2 Republicans back on the commission now, and they're getting called up and letting them know what's going on. So that's with the 6B study. So that's good, and we hope that it'll be sooner than later. I know you find this hard to believe, but they're having a little bit of trouble getting cooperation and getting figures from the PBMs. So they're having to
masters at that.
Use the subpoena route.
Wow.
But that's one thing I wanted to tell you about, if I could.
Sure.
We're also addressing it in congressionally, and that is in the Energy and Commerce Committee. That's the committee that I serve on. And the reason I serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee, the reason I wanted to serve on it, is because that's where the Health Subcommittee is. And I serve on the Health Subcommittee. In the Health Subcommittee, we passed a bill. It's called the Lower Cost, More Transparency Bill. And what it was really a conglomeration of about 25 different bills, 2 of which were my bills that address PBMs directly. And one of them had to do with the PBM Accountability Act. And the PBM Accountability Act was simply required PBMs to let the employers know the discounts that they were getting from the manufacturers. We feel like transparency is the best disinfectant. If you can, sunlight is the best disinfectant you can get. If the employers see that those discounts, that those PBMs are getting those discounts, they're going to want to know, where's that going? PBMs will tell you, well, we're using it to keep premiums lower. My premium hasn't gone down. I don't know about yours.
Mine has not. No.
No. So,
no way.
That's a good act because it'll put more pressure. That transparency will put more pressure on the PBMs to pass those savings along either to the plan sponsor or to the patient. That's why we've always wanted the discounts to be assessed at and given at the point of sale so that the patient will receive those discounts. That was one of the things that was part of it. We also had the Drug Price Transparency and Medicaid Act. That was in the Lower Cost, More Transparency Act. And what that did was eliminate spread pricing in Medicaid. And we all know about spread pricing. We know what they're doing there when, they'll take the list price, which may be $10, and then they're actually paying $5 for it, but they're charging the plan sponsor $10 and therefore charging the patient $10, whereas they're pocketing that $5. The Attorney General in the state of Ohio sued Express Scripts, the PBM, because they were using spread pricing in the state merit health plan in Ohio, and he referred to the PBMs as gangsters. I thought that was pretty good. And they are gangsters.
It's what it is.
And that's been happening in quite a few states, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The states are starting to get on top of that. And then you had the Change Healthcare fiasco, which I know you were you blasted them about that.
I walked into my local independent the day that you spoke, and he came around the counter and was asking me, "Did you see that?" He was so excited. He was like, "Buddy got him."
That
he was fired up about it.
Yeah. 2 things I want to tell you about that. Look, and let me preface both by saying that, look, we live in a capitalistic society. I'm not criticizing anyone for trying to make money. I own my own pharmacies for 32 years. And yes, I wanted to provide patient service, but I also wanted to make money. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with capitalism. But at the same time, show me the value that PBMs are bringing to healthcare. They're not bringing any value to healthcare.
Yeah.
If they were passing those savings along, then I would say, okay, yeah, that's bringing value, but they're not passing those savings along. But two things about Change Healthcare. First of all, the CEO making $24 million a year. I mean, come on, guys. How much is
along? Pass some of it along.
Give me a break. But most significantly, do you know who the largest employer of doctors in this country is now? United Healthcare. They employ almost 10% of all physicians in America.
I didn't know that.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
So they're in it together.
Doctors work for United Healthcare.
So they got the whole chain. I mean, top to bottom. I mean, it's and when you have that disruption like that, it impacts everybody.
Well, you're exactly right. It impacts everyone, and that's what we had the hearing on in the budget committee earlier this week that I was telling you about. As I say, it was not just about pharmacy; it was about healthcare in general. And think about it. When you think about healthcare, that's what we've got now. We've got these giant healthcare organizations, these giant hospital systems, and we had a witness at the budget committee hearing who is from the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, and they are the economists here in Congress. They say, okay, this bill is going to cost this much, or it's going to save this much. They do the economics of legislation. I asked him directly. I said, give me one example, just one example, where consolidation in healthcare has saved money. Crickets. Nothing. He said, I can't give you one. And that was just this week. I mean, you could hear jaws drop in the room. They were just...
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be interesting these next couple years, I guess, with the FTC and then what the momentum in Congress. And I know the NCPA is doing a great job. They had a great fly-in, I hear. I believe you spoke of that.
Yes.
Of course, we certainly assist the NCPA in any way we can in terms of the numbers and things like that. But I guess I'm going to switch gears here, Representative, and we got the election coming up, so that's going to be fun. I'm sure everybody can't wait for that. I guess you probably can't speak much to it, but what do you see how the election may impact any of this, good or bad?
Well, I think that I think it can have a positive impact on it. Hang on with me for just a second. I'll try to be as succinct as I can with this. I served in the Georgia legislature for 10 years. I've served in Congress for 10 years. The very worst legislation I have ever seen, the most awful legislation I've ever seen, was passed in Congress as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It was the prescription drug portion of it where HHS now, or CMS, is choosing 10 drugs every year. And essentially they're committing extortion, causing those drugs to have to bid and give them the lowest price that they can. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting, competition and letting them bid against themselves. The problem is that the University of Chicago has estimated that this will result in 392 fewer cures coming to market in the next decade. Even the CBO that I mentioned earlier, the Congressional Budget Office, they've said this is going to lead to less drugs coming to market because drug manufacturers are not going to invest in research and development. Now, I've been practicing pharmacy since 1980. I started when I was 10 years old. But anyway, I've been practicing pharmacy when I was in 1980. I've seen nothing short of miracles as a result of research and development. Nothing short of miracles. We can ill afford to deter research and development. Now, the pharmaceutical manufacturers need to do a better job with pricing. Yes, they do. They need to do a better job with their pricing. There's no question about that. But this legislation is so bad. Tell me, even if it's just, as the CBO says, 3 drugs every year, tell me which 3 drugs that's going to be. Is that going to be the cure for Alzheimer's? Is it going to be the cure for diabetes, for ALS? We don't know. Right. We cannot take that chance. We have to have research. The greatest innovators, the greatest scientists in the world are right here in the United States of America. And that's why I consider that legislation to be the worst legislation I've ever seen in my life.
Well, on top of that, you've got the research and development that has to be amortized over 5 years now.
That's exactly right.
That's a tax change. And if you're a compounder out there listening in, that may be impacting you because you may be doing some research and development type work with compounding.
But the reason I mentioned that,
any business, but
that's the kind of thing you get under Democratic leadership, and so if we have a change in administration, my hope is that we'll see things like that reversed, and we'll see true competition in healthcare, which is what we had the hearing on in the Budget Committee. How do we encourage competition in healthcare? Because that's what's going to lower prices in healthcare.
Now, of course, I mentioned we're tax people, CPAs here, so I have to touch on tax. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires next year.
Mm-hmm.
What's your crystal ball tell us about that? Are we going? I can tell you that the cash method of accounting is huge for a lot of pharmacy owners, and if that is reversed back to accrual basis, where a lot of pharmacies have to report on accrual, that's going to be a big tax change negatively for pharmacy owners. I guess, what is your crystal ball kind of feel there, and where's that looking right now?
Well, you're right. There are a lot of parts of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that are going to expire next year. Depending on whether we have a Republican or a Democrat in the White House, a lot will be determined by that. However, I will tell you that I think that, first of all, whichever way it goes, whether we have control of the House and the Senate and the White House, or whether it's split, I still think you're going to see some compromise on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. You'll see some compromise there because I don't think either party's going to have a big majority in any chamber, whether it be the House, the Senate, or of course in the White House it'd be just one. But nevertheless, I don't think either party is going to have a strong majority. So therefore, I think there's going to have to be some compromise. I think you'll see extensions on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. What we have to give up to get it is going to be the concern. There were parts of the child tax credit that were used to negotiate parts of extending some of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act as well.
Yep. Well, it's going to be interesting. That's for sure.
It always is.
Representative Carter, I don't want to hold you up anymore. We certainly appreciate your time and your words today, and we wish you guys all the best there in Capitol Hill, and keep fighting the good fight.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank all the pharmacists out there and all the citizens, and just stress to y'all how important advocacy is. You need to, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a new car salesman or farmer or a pharmacist, look, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. That's what I tell people all the time. So you need to be involved. And if you think that politics doesn't play a part in your profession, you better think again, because it does.
Bonnie does like that. Bonnie likes anything on the menu. She's hungry. She's an eater.
I'm an eater. Yeah.
He is. Well, thank you, Mr. Carter. We appreciate your time.